Good evening, New Life Christian Fellowship family, and to everyone who is joining us for our Bible study tonight. Tonight we are starting a new series about the life of Joseph in the book of Genesis. But before I continue, first we would like to thank the Lord that we finished our study of the book of Romans, and you can find all of the videos back in Facebook and also on YouTube. And also an important reminder for our New Life Christian Fellowship family. Tomorrow evening, November 11, Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. will be our Zoom fellowship. So please check your apps to see our Zoom meeting number so that you can join the meeting. Please be ready at 7:30 with your devices, and you don't have to download the Zoom app. You just need to click the link that we will give you and put the meeting number in it. So to start our Bible study tonight, I would like to invite you to turn with me in Genesis chapter 37. And we will be reading this whole chapter. I know it's long, but it's good because this introduction to the life of Joseph is very important. And this first part, this first lesson, already tells us a lot of the background and also about the first things that we notice about the life of Joseph and what God was already doing. And so let's read the whole chapter, beginning from verse 1. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate, a robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had the dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered round mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream and told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream. And this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So if we are going to study the life of Joseph, it would be good to know where he comes from. And so we are going to be looking at his ancestry. We're going to be looking at the life of his father a little bit, and then especially his own family, where he was born into. And so Joseph is the son of Jacob, who is also referred to later on as Israel in chapter 37. And Jacob is the son of Isaac. And Isaac is the covenant son of Abraham. Abraham is the father of faith, the father of the nation of Israel. And basically he is the one that God has chosen, that will be a father to the nation that God will use to bring his blessing to the whole world. And that is Jesus Christ. And so therefore, Joseph is a great-grandson of Abraham. So Joseph's story is so important that we find his story between 13 to 14 chapters of Genesis. So I encourage you to start looking at Genesis, beginning in chapter 35 up to 50, and you will see Joseph, his story there in between. And this is what we will be looking at in the coming weeks. And the first mention of Joseph is in chapter 30, verse 24, which is by his birth. When he was born as the first son of Joseph, of Jacob and Rachel. And so Joseph, the name means "may God add." And Rachel could not have children, but God had mercy upon her, and so God added a son to her life and blessed her. So the name Joseph means "may God add." Okay, and so if I'm going to look further into Joseph's life, I cannot help but mention a little bit about the life of his father Jacob. Jacob, when he was born born as a twin to his brother Esau, and yet Jacob, his name says it all, was a cheater. He was always trying to deceive people, and basically he had a difficult life, struggling with everyone, and until he made his encounter with God, and he asked God to bless him, and God blessed him and changed his name from Jacob to Israel. And the name Israel actually is changed from the name Jacob, that is a deceiver. The name Israel means the one who struggles with God, or the one who struggled with God. Jacob really asked God to bless him, and God blessed him. Now, so the father was already having this bad start in his life, but yet God blessed him, in the end. And Joseph was born into the family of Jacob. If we look at the family situation of Jacob, is that Jacob had two wives. He wanted to marry Rachel, but the father-in-law, Laban, to whom Joseph also had a problem, gave Leah, the second sister. So Joseph ended up marrying Leah and waited 7 years to marry Leah, and then waited another 7 years to marry Rachel. And then they got children, and then in between they also had the situation where Jacob also has two concubines, and their names were mentioned in chapter 37, and they also bore children, for Jacob. So basically Jacob had 4 wives, we can call that 2 official wives and 2 concubines, which means that they are, I would call substitute wives, and servants of the 2 wives that are given for the service of the master Jacob. And Jacob, we said already, had trouble with his father Isaac. Jacob had trouble with his brother Esau. Jacob has trouble with his father-in-law. Jacob doesn't have an easy time with his 4 wives, you can imagine. And so what now can we expect about the family life of Joseph? And yes, Joseph grew up in a blended family. So 4 mothers, different children. And Jacob is the 12th child in the family, the 11th son, the 11th boy. And now you can imagine that the wives were always competing, for attention and the blessing of Jacob. And the kids, making children were actually, they were trying to score points, so they were competing with each other, and making children was like, making points in the family, And Joseph was second to the last, and the last son, there was one more, Benjamin, who came after him. So it's a big family, basically, with 13 children, and Joseph is second to the last. And Joseph, his family was so competitive that it became a seedbed for tension. The situation was not already good to begin with. So before even we start to read the story in Genesis 37, there was already a bad atmosphere at home. And there was already pain from the start. Joseph, and chapter 37 starts by saying that Joseph was a young man of 17 years old, and he was already confronted with all of this domestic difficulties, situation, mothers competing for the husband, and kids competing for, their place in the family, and their place for the blessing coming from their father, Jacob. But Joseph had a special situation, and we see this in the first verses, that Jacob loved Joseph specially, and because it says there that Jacob loved Joseph because he got Joseph in his old age, and some say also it's special because it's his first son with Rachel. And actually, Rachel is the wife that Jacob really loves among the wives. And Rachel could not have children. Already the other wife had children. The other 2 concubines had children. And Rachel got this child late. So Joseph was a special child. And Jacob treated him specially. And he showed it to the other children that his favorite was Joseph. So there was favoritism in the family. Okay, and Jacob made a special coat, for him, and what happened because of this? Although Joseph was loved by Jacob, is that he was also hated. Yeah, in fact, it is 3 times mentioned in this chapter 37, that Joseph was hated by his brothers, and it was not just a hatred that stayed as hatred; it was continuously growing. Why? Because the other brothers were jealous of him, and they were jealous because he was favored by the father, and of course the older brothers were the ones who were always working. And it seems like Joseph is the one who was sent to look if the brothers are doing their work or not, and then Joseph has to report back. And it already said there that Joseph found his brothers and they were not doing something good, probably, and Joseph made a bad report about them. And so the other brothers didn't like the situation. He was clean, he had clean hands, and yet he was the one who was reporting to the father. So the brothers were very jealous of Joseph. And apart from that, Joseph also had dreams as a young man. He had dreams which were showing that what he had, or he was somebody that would be respected, that would be bowed down to. He would be honored above all of his brothers, and later on above his whole family. And yet he's one of the youngest. And remember, in that time, hierarchy was very important. The oldest in the family normally has the highest honor. The firstborn son has the highest honor, gets the blessing of the father, has the authority in the family later on. And so the younger you are, is the less of place of importance you have. So Joseph, second to the last, he was talking to his brothers. You know what I dreamed of? Later on, you're all going to serve me. You're all going to bow down to me. And all the more, you can imagine how the brothers hated him. Yeah. And so when Joseph also shared his dream to his father, even his own father did not appreciate this dream and actually rebuked Joseph to say, do you mean to say that me and your mom and your brothers are going to bow down to you? Wake up, son, and say, what is this dream that you have? What does this mean? What do you mean to say? And even probably Joseph didn't understand these dreams. Of course, he is young, he is naive, he is still ignorant of many things that are going on, and he's just trying to be a part of this big, messy family. And somehow there is something positive about him because he is getting these dreams of a destiny, of something good that will happen to him. And what is sad is that nobody appreciated these dreams that he was having. His brothers didn't support it, neither did his own father. Now going back to what happened, that Joseph was enjoying the love of the father and yet was hated so much by the brothers. And remember that hatred doesn't stay as hatred. We will see in the story that this hatred turns into bitterness, it turns into rage, and then it turns over to murder and violence. Because at some point, there happened an incident where Joseph was sent to find his brothers, and they were far away from home. And the brothers just saw Joseph, and with all of their with their hatred and bitterness and rage, they planned to kill him. So from simple hatred, it turned already to a violent reaction to Joseph. Can you imagine that? So please remember that anger is not simple. Hatred is not simple. It always will turn into a bigger and worse monster than a simple feeling of being angry and hating somebody. It will turn into something worse. So deal with it as early as possible. But the brothers did not, and they planned to kill him. And the amazing thing is that the ones who are planning to kill Joseph are his own blood brothers. We know of killings and murders that happen between a person and a stranger, or a criminal, or two groups of people. But within your own family, When somebody wants to murder a brother or a sister or whatever, that is terrible. But it gives us an indication that, yeah, this is a fallen family. These are fallen men. And they are following the footsteps of Cain and Abel. If you remember the first family mentioned in the Bible, the two brothers. And Cain murdered his own brother Abel just because of, comparing their offerings to God. So murder is running in a family, and it is sad when this happens, when troubles are not mended, homes which are supposed to be the place for comfort, the place for affection, the place for acceptance and love and forgiveness, can become a place of anger, bitterness, hatred, rage, and violence. And this is very sad. This is the extent to which the brothers felt against Joseph. And Joseph didn't understand probably what was happening because he was young and he just was, enjoying the love of the Father. He was also having dreams that he wanted to share. He was just happy to say, I had a dream, and yet nobody understood him, nobody got him. And yet now he also is faced with a strong attack from his own brothers. Luckily for Joseph, as we have read in the story, is that the brothers, although they planned to kill him, Reuben, the oldest brother, he said, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him into a deep well, the cistern, which is empty without water. And it is like a prison, at that time. You cannot go out unless somebody helps you. And they did that. They threw him in a cistern. And then later on, they said, what are we going to do with him if he's going to be here in the cistern? And then Judah, one of the brothers, thought, well, instead of killing him or letting him die here, we can sell him, to these traders. Ishmaelites were passing through, and these were nomads, in that time. And they said, let's sell him. And then they found people who wanted to buy Joseph as a slave. And they sold him for 20 shekels of silver. And I looked up, it's about 230 grams of silver, which is now, in our time, about 170 euros worth. So Joseph was sold for 170 euros to strangers, and they can do whatever they want with him. So basically, his own brothers, one, they planned to kill him, and second, they had a little bit of consideration. Okay, we will not kill him, but they sold him. And that's very painful. That's very traumatic for a young boy like Joseph. And so Joseph is carried off by the caravan of traders. And we know in the very last verse, that he was carried off to Egypt. From Canaan, which is basically the land of Israel, he was brought to Egypt. Yeah. And so the brothers, when they did that, they went home and they said, what they did to the coat of Joseph is that they dipped it in animal blood. So to make it look like he was attacked by a wild animal. And the father, when he was looking for Joseph, they told him, well, he was, we just found this coat with blood. And so everyone thought, at home, that he was killed by a wild animal. And so the brothers lied about what happened to Joseph. They lied to their father. And this is what anger and hatred can do. It will really deny the truth. It will really drive people to deceive others, to hide the truth. And Joseph ends up sold as a slave in Egypt. What is happening here? Are we reading from the Bible? Are we reading from a descendant of Abraham who is supposed to be blessed as God promised? And now we see these things happening in his own family, with his own brothers, and he is lost in limbo. He doesn't know where he's going to land. We can say, well, this has something to do with, it's because of the father, Jacob. It's his fault. Jacob is like recreating what happened in his own family because Jacob, when he was young, he was the favorite of the mom Rebecca. Yeah, Rebecca is the wife of Isaac. And so Rebecca, because Jacob was the favorite, they tricked, Esau and the father and Isaac, because Esau is the one who has the birthright. He has the blessing of Isaac. But then Rebecca with Jacob, they thought of deceiving Isaac and Esau so that Jacob was able to trick the father to give the blessing to him. And so now, with this deception, with this treachery that happened in his own life, it seemed that now this treachery is happening with his own children, with his favorite and loved son, Joseph. Yeah? And it's nice to begin to know that in the story, Jacob loved Joseph. Yeah? And Joseph had big dreams. He's looking at a bright future. Yeah? But the pain, the jealousy, the treachery, attempted murder, and being abandoned and cast away and sold by your own brothers is too much already for a young boy of 17 years old. Now he is broken up from his family. He is in a strange land, and he has no one to turn to. No more brothers, no more father, no more home to call. A strange culture, a strange people, a strange language. A young boy in the middle of all of this. Would you have had an experience like this when you were 17? And if you did have some painful experiences in your life, what would have been your reaction? How would you have reacted? And I'm sure in the home of Joseph, they spoke about God, they spoke about Yahweh, they spoke about this God that has called, the descendants of Abraham, the family of Jacob. They spoke about this blessing from God. And so Joseph was aware that they were part of this chosen people, and they have this one true God in their lives. And now he is sitting there in the middle of nowhere, and he must be wondering, where is this God now? He could not find this. What is the sense in all of these things? From being a favorite son to being sold as a slave, placed in the middle of nowhere. Here are a few things that we can note down. First, God has a plan for Joseph. We know that beforehand because we will read further up to chapter 50 and you will see the plan unfold. But we can say that God has a plan for Joseph because Joseph is a descendant of Abraham. And the promise of God said, Abraham, I will bless you. I will bless your descendants, and I will bless all the peoples of the world through you. And so Joseph is a descendant, so he has the blessing of God, which means God is watching him, he has his eyes on him, and God has a plan for his life, even if at this time in his life it doesn't look like this is God's plan. Yeah. And second, God is the one who places dreams and desires. So God gave these dreams to Joseph. Joseph did not just think, one day I will be better than my brothers. I will be better. Even with my father, I will become greater than them. No, I don't think it was that way. It's God who placed these desires and these dreams in Joseph's life. He was clearly telling him, I have a destiny for you, Joseph. I have a plan for your life. I'm going to give you a glimpse of it. But the way that you're going to take to reach that, I'm going to show you in the coming days. Not everything I will unfold, but there is something that you will reach in your life. And so God gives dreams to us because he has a plan for us, and he gives us a glimpse. He gives us a foretaste, an idea of what will come ahead. And he gives us, that's the way he gives us hope. Because in our life, we know it's difficult, and sometimes God is the one who puts the obstacles in our way because it's part of his plan. But he already tells us beforehand, he gives us his word and his promises so that we know that we have a future ahead of us. And what is wonderful about this story of Joseph that we will see is that God prepares his people for the future. All of the things that are happening in Joseph's life are part of the preparation for the next step, for the next steps, and the next things that will happen in Joseph's life. Even this betrayal, even these painful moments, God was preparing Joseph. God was preparing Joseph's character. He was building up a young man to become an adult. He was preparing this young boy with his faith to grow in dependence on God, to develop his gifts and abilities so that he will become a blessing. Indeed, as God said, I will make you a blessing for all the peoples of the earth. And we will see how that will unfold. You see, when God gives you a destiny, He also prepares you for that. He just doesn't give you, say, you know, this, you're going to be that, okay, now find your way. No, God orders our steps. And sometimes the steps are easy and comfortable and really a nice experience. And sometimes the steps that God wants us to take are the hard ones, the difficult ones. More work, more tears, more burden, sometimes more sorrow. There is pain. But it is a preparation for the big gain that God is preparing for us. And God was also preparing not only Joseph, but He was also preparing the salvation and the rescue for Joseph's family in the future. Yeah, they will be separated, but God was already putting some things into place, a plan into action for a future event that will happen, and Joseph will already be in the right place at the right time to rescue and to help his own family. And also, Joseph will be used by God and is preparing, Joseph is being prepared by God so that he will be also part of saving and rescuing also other people, other nations. And we will see that also in the study. So, when we think about this, and we look at chapter 37, which is tragic, and then the Word of God tells us, well, this is part of something big. That only tells us that our present difficulties, is not really something that just makes our life difficult. It may be a part of something big that God wants to unfold in our life. And this is why I want us to really look at the life of Joseph with excitement, with enthusiasm, because God is really so great in His plans for our lives, and unfolding the plans. There is nothing like how God does it in our life. Lastly, God fulfills His covenant and His promises. God was fulfilling His covenant to the great-grandfather of Joseph, which is Abraham. He was fulfilling His covenant with His chosen people, the people of Israel, that God would bless wherever God would lead them. So wherever God brought Israel, God would bless them. Yeah. And so we will see this in Joseph's life. We will see this in Joseph's family. And then we will see this in the nation of Israel later on in this study. Yeah. So Joseph's life, as we study it, will be an inspiration for us. The experiences will provide us a lot of life lessons. And his commitment to the Lord provides encouragement for us when we will be tested ourselves. And this verse will be our guiding verse for all of the study that we will be making, and we will see this happening in the life of Joseph. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Joseph's life reflects also the life of Jesus in many ways. But at the same time, it is also a life that we can also identify with and be encouraged with. Yeah? Joseph was able to overcome many obstacles and tests. And because God was with Joseph, he was victorious over every test. His life will reveal to us the secrets of his success. The life of Joseph teaches us how to deal with the tangled threads of our own lives. So whatever mess there is still in our lives, we will see in the life of Joseph how these things can be sorted out in our lives as well. So next week, we will be taking up Genesis 39 and not 38. Yeah. So please read Genesis 39 in advance. Take your Bible with you and a notepad the next time that we have the Bible study next Tuesday at 7:30. And I'll invite you to learn and grow together. I will do my best to communicate everything that we will find and dig in the life of Joseph, and we will share together the blessings of these lessons for our lives. So I pray that you have been blessed by this teaching. Please ponder and reflect upon these points. You can always go back to it. That's the wonder of having these broadcasts. You can always replay it. But I encourage you to really open your hearts as you open your minds in the studying of the life of Joseph, and let the Lord speak to you as His Word is revealed to us. God bless you all. Until next time, goodbye.